35 years on from the killing fields of Cambodia and the overthrow of the Khmer Rouge. But do the anniversary celebrations mask a growing discontent and a challenge to decades of authoritarian rule? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. Cambodia has been remembering its darkest hour. In less than 4 years, during the 1970s, 1 in 5 of its people died from overwork, starvation and execution under the Khmer Rouge. Survivors have been marking the 35th anniversary of the overthrow of the regime, but the mood of celebration is set against a current backdrop of strikes and calls for the resignation of longtime leader Prime Minister Hun Sen. To our discussion in just a moment. First, Scott Heidler has this report for Inside Story from the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh.
It's not a common sight here in Cambodia. Prime Minister Hun Sen out greeting his supporters. Public appearances and speeches are rarities, but after a few difficult weeks in his country, he was out on Tuesday getting FaceTime. Even as the ruling party puts on a show for the 35th anniversary of its Victory Day, some members are questioning their loyalty. That's because of how they've been handling this growing opposition and also its crackdown on striking workers. Sus Samal is a ruling party official in a small farming community. His son Kim Palib was shot dead by security forces while protesting last Friday. Kim worked in a garment factory for 9 years.
Since Hun Sen gave the order for the military to use violence on protesters, I'm very disappointed.
The grieving father was a member of the Cambodia People's Party at the beginning in 1979. He says it's going to be difficult for him to continue his support if the government does not change the minimum wage and stop the violence. But there's another issue that's deepening the line between the ruling party and the opposition, a growing generational divide.
For the older generation who survived from war, what they have now comparing to zero is always better. So everything is better than zero. Nothing can be compared to zero. And because of that, all they wanted to have was their life. But for us, as younger generation, we need more than that. We need life, but life that we can smile, we can be happy, we can be proud.
To those who have followed Cambodia's development since its civil war, this divide is much more than politics. It can determine the country's future.
We are really at the crossroad right now, whether we are moving for a modern society where a democratic system will function, we are all going back to the dark days of communist area.
There are many challenges ahead that will determine just which system will prevail, and which one the 2-month-old daughter of a slain garment factory worker will live under. Scott Heidler for Inside Story in Phnom Penh.
Let's bring in our guests now. In Phnom Penh, Sipan Pai, Secretary of State for Cambodia and government spokesman. From Leeds in the UK, we have Chiang Vanarith, a lecturer at Leeds University and senior fellow at the Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace. And joining us via Skype from Phnom Penh is Cherry Seng, a human rights activist, lawyer and writer. Thank you all very much for being here today. There were plenty of issues raised there in Scott's report. First of all, I want to address these protests. I'm going to direct a question to you, Sipan Pai. Why did the government crack down with such deadly force on those garment workers on Friday?
Well, I appreciate to raise that issue. The government live close to 100 days of the protesting, led by the CNRP as they pretend as an opposition party. And we understand that we're looking for a tolerance, a partnership, dialogue have to be taking place, like to establish what we call like a spirit of the calm and restraint. But we, like a number of, the last 90 something, we don't have any armed force or any armed policemen to do monitoring. Those armed force or policemen, they serve with the radio talkie, like the communication. we beg them to be, we respect them to be hold a demonstration, but we're looking for a, non-violent, wording.
So you talk about non-violence, you talk about restraint. I'm going to have to jump in there because at least five people were killed after police fired on garment workers protesting outside of a factory. Why was that?
Well, it's a mob activity beyond than, protest or beyond the demonstration. So they throw a stone, they use the crude made, the Molotov cocktail, they use the slingshot, they use a iron bar to harm, to attack the unarmed policemen. So the mob taking place in that area, and that's why we have a mandate to restore law and order, bring back peace, and bring back happy to the people.
So Terry Seng, if I could just give you a chance to respond to that. Mr. Siphan Pai, representing the government there, refers to the garment workers as a mob, throwing Molotov cocktails and stones and such. And in a sense, they had no choice other than to fire to retain public order. What's your response to that?
We have had peaceful demonstrations, massive peaceful demonstrations since the election in July. Why the violence now? Why the agitation now? It's suspicious. The situation is suspicious. There needs to be legitimate investigation into the clashes. And also, there were snipers aiming at garment workers who were having lunch that day. My brother interviewed them at the hospitals. I know this firsthand.
Mr. Siphan Pai, that's a strong allegation that there were snipers targeting the protesters. Do you agree with that?
Well, as investigation must done in this situation. That's why the government, that's why the court, requests the president and vice president of CNRP to be in court. To respond number of the questions that they do always inside the people. Again, the government as a call for a prime minister elected, to step down as well as to destroy Cambodian People Party. It's not supposed to be that way.
Chang Vanarith in Leeds, I mean, you're looking at it from outside of Cambodia. On the one side, we've got Cherry Seng saying this is very suspicious. On the other side, you've got saying it was necessary to restore public order. I mean, we must remember that a couple of days later, an opposition rally was also cleared from Freedom Park. What's your take on the situation over the weekend?
Well, it still remains controversial debate on that regard. But it is necessary to establish a truth-finding commissions which have its own independence to investigate the violence. Then it can prove who should be more responsible in that violence. So at the moment, both sides criticize and blame on each other. So it's not a healthy debate. I think the only way out it's more appropriate is to establish a commission to investigate the violence.
Do you think this violence, which I've read some people say it's the worst state violence that's been seen in some 15 years, do you think it marks a turning point in Cambodia, Chang Vanarith?
Definitely, it was an unfortunate event took place in Cambodia recently, and it can be negative turning point in the democratic development process in Cambodia. However, I believe that there are still possible for open dialogues and negotiation between the conflicting parties.
OK, and that is an issue we'll explore just a little later in the programme. Cherry Seng, I just want to return to this issue of the opposition protest being cleared on Sunday, right after that garment protest was fired upon. Do you link these two events together?
They're definitely linked together. This government is fearful of the people. It's waging war on the people, basically. What happened within the last few days it's a war against their own people. It's a reflection of the fear and of maintaining their grip on power and their sense that they have no choice except for violence. It was more than unfortunate. It's illegal under international law, and it's illegal under Cambodian law. It's criminal.
Sipan Pai, this, I mean, it's a fair point, isn't it, that these protests were happening for a number of months in Freedom Park. They were allowed, they were free, they were peaceful. So why, on Sunday, did the security forces go in and clear those opposition protesters?
Well, that's against the law. That the park, what we call a Freedom Park, that's designed protesting. That's a guarantee as a mandate by the law. And then that the law don't allow anyone to like a stage in that place to become a quarter to incite the people, violencing, especially, the Excellency Sampansi as well Kamsuka, all incite the people, take, violence, like a shout for topple to the government, even though the Prime Minister already elected, decided by the majority already. So the democratic society represent, they elect, Mr. Sampan, Excellency Sampansi as well, Excellency Kamsuka, shall be sit in the National Assembly and resort, peacefully as in the house, not resort, we cut, boycott to negotiate, boycott of a dialogue with the government as well as the National Assembly.
Okay.
It's not proper play, proper thing. The guarantee to assure the proper functioning of the institution. That's
okay.
what
those elections, if I can just jump in, because those elections brought Hun Sen back into power back in July, as you mentioned there. This is a Cambodian leader who's one of the world's longest-serving prime ministers. He's been in power for more than 28 years and recently vowed to stay on for more than another 10. Now, he fled to Vietnam during Pol Pot's regime in the late 1970s, deserting the Khmer Rouge and joining the rebels. Vietnam then installed a new government in Cambodia in 1979. In 1985, Hun Sen became prime minister. He's been accused by critics of being a dictator who's used intimidation and corruption to maintain his power base. Chang Vanarith, why do you think Hun Sen wants to stay in power until, I think he says, 74 years old? I mean, that's another 13 years.
Well, I think the political systems in Cambodia and the structural political issues in Cambodia probably allow him to remain a key figure in, to some extent, maintaining political stability.
But is he good for Cambodia's future?
Peace. Well, I think what he needs to do, and he already recognized recently after the serious setback in the last election, is to seriously reform to meet the new demands emerging from the younger generations. So that is a turning point, or somebody already mentioned, it's a crossroad of Cambodia, whether he need to take away with the new reforms with concrete results. That is his missions. But his popularity has been seriously downgraded in the recent months.
Sipan Pai, was the opposition's gains in those elections a shock to the CPP? Does it show that it's barely relevant now to Cambodia's young?
Well, the election, it means that result, it proved that they still need, that Hun Sen are their leaders, because majority already vote for him, always, they support him, even though Sampansi as well as the Kamsuka, they call for the step down during the, before election or as well as in campaigning or after that one. So if we understand and we respect the will of the people, should not anyone hijack the majority of the will. And so no one disregard on this one. So go with the majority. So majority still need, Samdech Hun Sen. So everyone has the respect from, the choice that it has been made, after, in the election. That's a democracy.
Jerry Seng, why did Sam Rainsy's opposition party make such gains in that last election?
It's not surprising in hindsight. It's not surprising. The sentiments of the people have always been with the democracy movement. It just happens that this election allowed them the space to express their will publicly and as a united force because of the social media and the smartphones and the young population who didn't experience the Khmer Rouge. They don't have the trauma of their parents. So in hindsight, it's not surprising. We always knew that the support was there. Let me also say, in response to Mr. Siphanphai, that this current regime now is illegitimate, and this government is unconstitutional. And not only that, a step further back, the elections were riddled with irregularities, to put it mildly. There have been serious charges of corruption, of violence, of duplicate names, and this is why we have been demanding for an investigation of individuals and to form a committee to investigate into the election irregularity before the people demanded for Hun Sen to step down.
Siphanphai, what is the status of that investigation, if any?
We do have a unique, law that's involved with the election. They do have a mechanism from like a national election committee throughout, a constitutional council. They take care what's going on with, dispute in the election. So the due process they already implemented, and what we get to understand that each poll station we have only 2 persons represent from the CPP. We have 2 persons representative from the CNRP, 2 persons represent from Sam Rainsy, 2 persons represent from the human rights as a Kamsukha political party. And then we don't see that many that claim from the polling station on except the Sam Rainsy as well as the Kamsukha. So due process we have to verify who lodged the claim.
Okay.
At the polling station, but we don't see any that one.
Okay.
But they claim before election
Obviously, you're talking there about bringing these two sides together in talks. Not only do we now have to address the issues of the violence and the breaking up of protesters, but also this outstanding issue of electoral fraud. What chance that there will be an investigation and the two sides will then join in talks?
I think the way the government have responded to the elections irregularities have not yet satisfied those supporters of the opposition party. That's why they keep demanding for the serious investigations. So that is the issue, I think, the remaining issue after the election that need to be comprehensively and effectively addressed by all party concerns. But unfortunately, it hasn't satisfied those supporters of the opposition party yet. So this is something that I think the necessity of the electoral reform in Cambodia in order to have smooth, free and fair elections.
Jerry Seng, what are the demands of the young is an improved standard of living, higher wages. We saw from the garment workers, they're looking to double their wages. But one has to remember that these strikes that have been going on have cost the industry an awful lot of money. Industry estimates some $200 million. So surely that in itself is damaging to the country.
It's damaging to the elites who are accumulating more and more wealth. Requesting $160 per month as a wage for working 10 hours on average, 7 days a week, is more than reasonable. It's not even a living wage if we are to compare the price of living in Phnom Penh in 2014. It's really expensive everywhere, and Phnom Penh is no different. So how can a family or even an individual live on $160 a month when a can of Coke is still costing 50 cents wherever you find a can of Coca-Cola?
Siphanphai?
Well, I understand that $160, I mean that the number is what we call manipulated by CNRP as a buying vote, $160. But as the government, we do, establish what we call a council, labor council to take care of that, the dispute between the employee and employer as well as mediated by the government. So the talk still, going on, is ongoing. So that we want to see those people, like between employee, employer, as well as the government want to have a talk and dialogue. Because we, as a living in the free market, we don't want to interfere that much. Let the both sides, like a partner, to talk, partner, to grow together. That's one. But the affiliate or a CNRP as a unionism, they boycott. They don't want to talk. They asking the demand $160 as a buying vote promised by CNRP. So the government don't object anything, but the government try to mediate both employer and employee to come up with a median or a ground. The middle ground that both party could agree together. So that's why you see the number from the $90 something to $100.
Okay.
This on the basic.
Chang van der Rith, there's a lot of talk about talks now, both with the garment workers and the opposition. Do you think this is a hopeful situation? Do you think Cambodia does have a bright future?
Well, it's always hopeful. I think the unfortunate event is that the violence on the factory workers and the prolonged strikes that really harmed the textile industry in Cambodia. I think we need to listen to different reasons and perspectives from different stakeholders, especially between the workers and the managers, owners of the factories. From the owners and managers, of course, it's difficult to double the salary from $80 to $160 hour night. It needs some time to adjust to this kind of a wage demand raised by the workers. I think the reason increased from 80 to 100, it's one of the significant steps, and I think negotiations should continue in order to increase the wages for the worker, decent wage that they can live and survive.
Thierry Seng, 35 years on from one of the worst atrocities the world has ever seen. Do you think young Cambodians are optimistic about their future?
I believe so. What we have seen within the last several months, save the last several days of violence, have been extremely hopeful and encouraging. I'm very proud and impressed with the courage of the young population, who are the majority of the Cambodian population. 70% of 14 million Cambodians were born after the Khmer Rouge, and they want to live in 2014. They don't want to live in the Middle Ages, in the Cold War politics of the leaders of the Cambodian People Party's regime. They want to join the international community. They see via Facebook and social media how the rest of the world's living, and they want to join that prosperous world. And I want to say that with change, positive change requires creative tension. It's unfortunate and despicable that the government cracked down with deadly force. But we know that the status quo will not give up power if there is not a demand by the oppressed. And I'm hopeful that this is creative tension that will lead to flourishing for Cambodia.
Okay.
I'm hopeful.
Well, there is a good point to end on. Thanks very much to all our guests for joining us today. Sipan Pai and Thierry Seng in Phnom Penh and Chang van der Rith in Leeds. And thank you very much also for watching. A reminder, you can find this story and many others at aljazeera.com. Just follow the links for shows and Inside Story. From me and the whole team here, bye for now.